Joining us now to talk about his view on things is Harrison Faulkner, a journalist who has worked in different agencies, including at True North, and he is an independent journalist, a citizen journalist, if I may. Harrison, nice to see you again. How you doing these days?
Great to see you both, guys. This is a really interesting watch, I have to say. It's showing, well, early results are a bit different than I expected, so it's really going to be a fun night.
Well, tell me what you mean by that. Different in which way?
Well, I was expecting this to be a bit of a doomsday scenario for the conservatives. I mean, when every poll is telling you one thing, there's got to be something behind that. But to see the conservatives overperforming in Atlantic Canada so far is a really good result. And the way I judge this, guys, and again, I'm not one of those political experts that knows the bellwether ridings in Atlantic Canada that are going to tell you what the result is. I don't know those details, but I just go off of the facial reactions I see on CBC.
Right. That's a good way of doing it.
I saw the At Issue panel come on to the CBC show. Althea Raj comes on, Andrew Coyne, and Althea Raj looks miserable. She seems shocked. First thing she says is how this is turning out to be a rough few results for the Liberals. That tells me that this is going to be an interesting night. It's going to be very close. I still don't know if it's enough to tell who's going to win, obviously, but this is going to be a lot closer than I thought. I really did think that there was something behind the polls, and there still may be. Right? It's early days.
Yeah, never underestimate the sabotage of Doug Ford and his little friends. But it does look like in Central Nova, Sean Fraser probably should have spent more time with his family because he's about 500 votes behind Bryson Jenkins, the Conservative challenger.
Yeah, and next door, Cumberland Colchester, the Conservative Stephen Ellis is firming up his win. Now, it looks, though, that in South Shore St. Margaret's, the Liberals have picked up a seat from the Conservatives. And so it's going both ways. Terra Nova in Newfoundland, just want to make sure I'm getting things right. I'm not an expert in the Atlantic either, but I thought it was going to be a total wipeout, total blowout. But Terra Nova, the peninsulas, looks like a gain, beating Liberal incumbent Anthony Germain. And that's enough of a lead, and enough polls have come in. You know what? I thought the Atlantic would be a total wipeout too, Harrison.
Yeah.
Hey, let me ask you, what's your view on the polls? And I say that, let me preface that with, Efron, let me know if you can pull up that tweet from David Coletto. A few weeks ago, David Coletto, who I really respect as a pollster, he works for Abacus, he said, do you really believe that the Conservatives have closed a 15-point gap in a week? Or do you think that there's something funny with the polls? And at first I thought, what? This is a pollster who's saying there's something funny with the polls. That's unusual. And he said that there was some sort of response bias. And I Googled that to make sure I knew what that meant. And he said, so he implied that you couldn't, and it was astonishing to hear this coming from a pollster. Let me read just a tiny bit from his tweet, and he did this on April 6th. He said, response bias occurs when people who choose to participate in a survey differ in meaningful ways from those who do not. This can distort results, as the opinions captured may not reflect the broader population. For example, if certain groups feel strongly about a topic, they may be more likely to respond or complete the survey, while others remain silent. The chosen mode, online or IVR. Some may ignore phone calls. Response bias can undermine the accuracy of poll results. This isn't actually the one I was referring to, but this was interesting. Efron, could you find the other one where he basically says people may be responding through peer pressure, thinking that the pollster wants to hear you're voting for Mark Carney? If you can find the other one, Efron, I'd appreciate it. But just because it was astonishing to see a pollster say, maybe we shouldn't trust the polls, that was his own gut saying, things are so wacky, how can you close a 15-point gap in a week? My question for you, Harrison Faulkner, is, are the polls accurate? Is it a psyop, like an info op? Is it an attempt to psych us out? You can tell that hit job in the Globe and Mail, the Toronto Star, was a psychological operation to demoralize the Conservatives by saying Pierre Poilievre would lose his own seat. How much of the polls is that kind of a psychological manipulation, and how much is it pollsters just genuinely trying to get into people's brains in the age of cell phones and shyness?
It's tough to say. I mean, my gut doesn't want me to go to what I would consider to be a pretty dark place, to assume that all these pollsters are, trying to work against what is probably half the country, if not more, and to support one party. These pollsters had the Conservatives leading for about 2 years.
Yeah.
And I think that when you have such a major swing as we had seen, when we had seen a 25-point lead evaporate, and we saw the Liberals start to pull away from the Conservatives in the polling, you would imagine that if you were a pollster and you were showing these results, some part in the back of your mind might be saying, wow, this is an insane result that we're showing.
Yeah.
A crazy reversal. We should maybe try to hedge a little bit, and kind of try to basically say this could be wrong, because to a lot of people that flip, that reversal, is so astonishing that many people just thought there was something wrong with it, and there must have been something wrong with these polling figures. I don't think that there is some very dark trick being played on us with these polls. I think that they are. I'll put it this way: I think that the pollsters just have shown a fundamental lack of ability at finding a way to get to actual voters, because they've been wrong so often. Right? They were wrong with Brexit. They were wrong with 2016. They were wrong in 2024 in the U.S. They get it wrong so often because methods of communication are changing. I just don't believe that there is some deep, dark trick being played on us. I just think that the Trump factor is serious. It can't be denied. It really did dominate this election. It really clearly is a ballot question for a lot of Canadians. And I think they look at it, especially liberal-leaning, centrist Canadians who are of the liberal persuasion, perhaps, or undecided voters. In this day and age, when Trump is dominating the ballot, they want whoever is the least like Trump. That's not going to be a conservative in that scenario. So that's where I think that's how I think the pollsters got to that result.
I think you're right. Hey, Efron found that one tweet I want to read. It's very quick. Let me just read it. This is by David Coletto. He says, so this was on April 21st. This is just a week ago today. He said, to go from a 15-point Liberal lead a month ago to a 2-point one today is pretty remarkable. If you believe that, then you also have to believe, one, the Liberals have run a horrible campaign. Two, the Conservatives have run an amazing campaign. So he's basically saying this doesn't pass the gut check. And I got to give credit to a guy who is willing to say, I don't trust my model. I don't trust my profession in this wacky world. So I just wanted to show that, and I appreciate your answer. I just wanted to close the loop by showing that that tweet. What time, Sheila, do you know what time? Is it at 9:30, 4 minutes from now, that the floodgates open? So this is, if I'm not mistaken, everything, I think, out to BC. Is that right?
Out to BC, yeah. Yeah.
So in 4 minutes' time, we're going to have a ton of results. Harrison, do you have to go, or can you stay with us?
I can stay for about probably 10 more minutes.
Okay.
And then I got to jump to another.
Okay,
lap.
well, just give us a signal when you got to go. But I wouldn't mind seeing these along with you.
You know, before we move on from this, I just dug this up from 338. And take that for what you will, because 338 aggregates even crazy polls into their data. Like, just like people who follow the NDP door knockers and do polls, like they aggregate that in. But this just shows you how wildly the polls can vary, even in Alberta, where you're not shy to tell people that you're voting Conservative. Right. So every time I was like, what the hell is going on with these polls? I would go back to this and deprogram my mind, because there aren't shy Conservative voters in Alberta, and look at the range of numbers there. They're varying, what is that, 30 points between one poll and the other.
Yeah, and I respect Abacus and Innovative on the one hand, and I know that Leger, like they're not in the baloney business. Leger has too much skin in the game. Isn't that interesting? Well, I appreciate you showing that, Sheila. Now, Alberta, I mean, I know how I am. Let me just give you a personal anecdote. Whenever I get a phone call from a pollster, I think it's a trick. I think they're trying to get Ezra Levant to say something. They know it's me. It's not really a real pollster, and they're trying to get me to say so. And so I hang up because I'm afraid that it's a trick. So call me a conspiracy theorist, but I just don't want to tell people my thoughts unless it's sort of an official moment. So I don't know. I think these days a lot of people are mistrusting of the establishment, and pollsters, I think, are part of that. It's 9:28. We are moments away from the big reveal of, and it's just going to be massive. And this is because Canada has so many time zones. Think about it: Pacific, Mountain, Central, Eastern, Atlantic, and Newfoundland. That is 6 time zones. There's not a lot of countries like that. Russia is one of them, but I hazard the guess that maybe China is one of them. But I don't think there's other countries with that many time zones. So how do you make it fair enough for people in Newfoundland and BC, and but not have the result in hand before BC gets their? So I think it's actually the way they do it in really 3 chunks is about as fair as you're going to get in a country with this many time zones. I remember being a boy growing up in Alberta, and it did feel like we were the leftovers, that the result was already known before the Alberta vote was even counted. That did irk. But what are you going to do in a country as big as ours? So we have about 60 seconds before that comes in. Sheila, where are you looking to get the quickest results?
I'm looking at CBC. They're doing a good job of aggregating it because they have that floating map that you can sort of drop over. If you listen to David Cochrane, he says he's getting pictures sent to him from the polling stations of the votes. He said that on air. That I guess the scrutineers have both looked at because they were dealing with the Elections Canada website going down. Now it's back up, but CBC, at least you can float over top of it. I'm sad to say that it looks like Rick Perkins is going to lose his seat. Rick Perkins was so strong on the Green Slush Fund file, but he looks like he's going to lose his seat in South Shore St. Margaret. He's currently down by about 500 votes.
You know what? On your advice, I clicked on over to the CBC, and the first story I read is, could toss-up ridings like Calgary Centre decide this election?
You know, I also, back to like how these polls are aggregated, I saw 338 given Alberta 9 Liberal seats like a week ago. So that should tell you just how unpredictable these polls are.
And then the next story, and I don't think I clicked on an Alberta tab, Showdown in Calgary Confederation.
Confederation.
Yeah. And then the last one I'll just read is one I do believe, collapsing NDP vote in Atlantic Canada. I say again that the Conservatives are performing near the top of their range. If they wind up with 40% tonight, it'll be the best result in 20 years for the Conservatives. But the problem is the NDP is just vaporizing, and you're having a unite the left. And Jagmeet Singh was play fighting for 2 years. It was almost like he was, it was a fixed fight. All right, it's 9:30. We should be seeing results almost immediately. Harrison, are you poking around anywhere looking for results?
I've got the CBC YouTube stream on my on one of my monitors here as well. Just to again, I've got it on mute, but I'm just gauging the facial expressions here.
Oh, good. That's a good way to do it. You're like a lip reader. You're a face reader.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to hear what they have to say, of course. But no, I'm just catching these numbers here, and obviously we're going to see a massive jump in both numbers here, and probably in a couple of minutes. I'm curious. I'm sure you've gone over this already in your broadcast, but the failure of the NDP to perform in the GTA and to do the job that the Conservatives need them to do.
Right.
How much of a concern is that, and are you getting any word of concern from the Conservatives at all, people involved in the campaign, about the failure of the NDP? Because to me, that is a major factor to determine whether or not the Conservatives walk away with a victory.
Harrison, I will join the NDP to push for Rachel Notley to run for leader. That's how much I need the NDP to be a fully functioning party in this country.
Well, be careful what you wish for. I have been watching Wab Kinew, the NDP premier of Manitoba, and I got to say, and I was extremely critical of him when he ran because he had a pretty rough period of his life where he said and did some things that were really iffy. But boy, has he ever grown into the job. He looks good. He sounds good. He's Indigenous, of course, which cuts some ice with people because he's a symbol of reconciliation. But he's not really whiny about it. Like I think I think he's had some tone perfect responses to Trump. Actually, he has this one line: "We'll never be 51st straight, but we can be your best friend." Like the way he does, he has this happy style, and I think now I don't know if he speaks a word of French, and that really is.
Oh, he does actually. He's fully bilingual. Just to add more.
Really?
To that, yes, he's really solid. I have to say. You can see the charisma. You can see it in how he presents himself. He could be a very good leader for the NDP, but why would he do that? I first of all, I learned this recently that no premier has ever become the prime minister, which I find to be very interesting. But you can go.
Jason Kenney thought he would be the first. Jason Kenney thought he would be the first, didn't he?
Yeah, and so. I don't know why Wab Kinew would do this. I think that the NDP has a period of soul searching. Obviously, I imagine Rachel Notley might throw her hat in the ring for that leadership position. But to me, just looking at this tonight, the NDP need to get votes that they're not getting in the polls in the GTA. They need to start splitting the Liberal vote, and that's kind of where elections are won and lost. So. If NDP voters don't show up, then that could be a big issue.
I think you're right. That's the story of the Atlantic. And, there was a little statistic in the French leaders debate that I caught. They timed how much talk time each of the four leaders had. And Jagmeet Singh was significant behind the others. And I don't think it's because the MC was being unfair. I think Jagmeet Singh is so weak on policy, he just doesn't have a lot to say. We got to let our friend Harrison go, but I really appreciate you joining us. I know you got a busy night. A lot of people want to hear what's on your mind. Thanks for joining us, and keep up the fight out there.
Thank you very much, guys. Have a great night, and hopefully this goes the right way.